To the people of Guam and to my colleagues, good morning. We're currently in the Committee of the Whole discussing Bill number 368-37LS. Good morning, my colleagues, and also good morning to the panel here representing the Department of Corrections. Sarge, do we need to swear them in again, or they're good for the week? Okay, and we're about to complete our first round of questions, and Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and thank you again to the panel from DOC for being here. Really appreciate your answers yesterday. So we're on this bill to appropriate $5 million from your actual construction costs for a new prison to current operating costs or current capital improvement projects for the existing prison. And of course, there was an amendment proffered to reduce it to $1 million, which we were discussing, but we did not pass yet. So I hear you, and I fully understand what you're saying about the conditions at the prison, that they need to be fixed immediately, that there were some unforeseen circumstances, including the typhoon, that really damaged the facilities and caused further need. And that's in addition to the long overcrowding that has been going on. That's not been in the last year or two, that's actually been growing over the previous years. So that's exactly why we were trying to build a new prison. I would be very hesitant to not fund a new prison. And, but I'm concerned by what we've heard yesterday, including that the estimate for the A&E of the new prison, you put at $16 million, Director?
That's
Can you
correct.
tell me?
$16 million, $483,598.
Can you tell us how you know that, and what is the status of this procurement?
Right now, the consultants, as the ones who won the bid, when they gave this price, I believe with the last meeting with Major Uggan and DPW representatives, with the consultants, one of the conversations that's supposed to happen, and he's supposed to brief me right now, Major Uggan is out filing, is would this price be different if the scope of work changes a little bit?
So you're saying the consultant, meaning you already went out for bid for the A&E and somebody won the bid?
That's correct. Yeah.
And they estimated $16 million?
$16 million.
So how were you going to pay that? Because normally you can't go out for bid unless you identify the source of funds.
Yes, DPW had the funding for that, and I believe they had something in the area of, I can recall, $800,000, the advertisements and stuff and all that, right, to put it out for bid. And there were several bidders, and these individuals that...
No, I mean to fund the actual award.
Oh, fund the award.
Was DPW going to fund the A&E?
Well, they're the ones who were given the funds, right, so that they could put the advertisements out for bid, right, to show that we needed an architectural design, an A&E. And the bidder that won that, I believe, when they were selected, one of the first meetings they had is to sort of give an estimation of how much it would cost.
Yes, so how were you, before you put it out to bid, you had to determine whether you can pay for it or not. So how were you going to pay for it?
Well, part of, I believe what I was briefed on is that there was supposed to be, a committee, that construction committee, of course, that includes GIDA, and it also includes DPW, of course, and some of the information and communications was that they'll look at the approach that's being made in terms of, design build, just to look at what kind of scope of work are we talking about with the 4 phases that this master plan indicates.
Just a minute. It was not a design build because you said they went out for a bid on A&E alone.
Yeah, that's right.
So the design build no longer.
Yeah, right.
So how were you able to go out for bid without a source of funding for the A&E, to pay for the A&E?
That cost to go out and put that out for bid was coordinated, and DPW had the funds for that. I believe the
From where? What's the source?
I got to get back and find out what it was, but I'm assuming it was possibly ARP money.
Okay, because I'm being told now that this is being put on hold until you find the money for the A&E after you've already put it out to bid.
Well, with this $16 million for an 83, you know, that the cost, these individuals that won this consultant, you know, that won the bid, they said this is the price that they're looking at.
Are they the A&E consultants, or they're some other consultant?
I believe they're the A&E
Okay,
consultants.
so
that
you
won
went
the
out
bid,
for
right?
bid and you awarded
Yep.
one company to do your A&E, and now you're saying you didn't have money in the beginning for the A&E, or that DPW was supposed to pay for the A&E?
Our balance was, as we said, this
$5
$5 million,
million.
and we
Okay.
don't have the other 10
I
million, 10 or $11 million and 483,000. We don't have that in our
Okay,
balance.
and then okay, so that's troubling, that
Yeah.
we can't, you went out for bid, you awarded a company, their estimate is far beyond the 5 million that you've been appropriated. We're trying to put 5 million more, or we did in the budget, give you 5 million more for that. That would bring you up to 10, but you're saying, don't use that for the A&E, let's use that for other things right now. So that's just gonna get you further and further away from a new prison, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And now, and you also told us that, well, we learned that one of our colleagues passed a bill here to change that 5 million to 15 million a year, and that was vetoed. And the governor said she was concerned that this was going to impact the debt service and future bond borrowing. And you put that together with what you said yesterday, that this new prison is no longer a priority. GMH is a priority, GDOE is a priority, Simon Sanchez is a priority, but this new prison is not. That's the first that I've heard that, because it's supposed to be legislature setting the priorities, right? And we're trying to prioritize a new prison so that it, you know, we don't end up with what we did with GMH, where we authorized a new hospital many years ago as well. And, you know, they're still talking about going out for the bond in the future. And I think
And
that's
Speaker,
what they're trying to tell you. Or
Yeah, and
you told us too that you went to meetings with the governor, told her the condition that you told us yesterday of the prison. And one of my colleagues asked, well, what did the governor offer to help? And it sounded like, even since the typhoon, you couldn't have a consultant from GPA tell you the status of the generators, because you said you're still not sure whether they need to be new or repaired. And this really sounds like a very low priority when they couldn't even help you to determine whether you need new or repair the generators. And all of this since typhoon, which was over a year ago, maybe a year and several months now, for sure. So how were you going to pay the 2 million estimate for FEMA? As you told us, you have to pay it first and then the FEMA reimburses. So how were you going to pay the 2 million?
Well, Doris, who's in communications with the recovery office, you know, to look at FEMA's issues with us and some of the claims, right? She indicated one of the questions she's asking FEMA about is, should, let's say, for instance, we get the funds, right? The release of this $5 million, the flexibility of having it used to fix some of the areas we have at our current facilities. One of the questions asked is, well, does that change FEMA's position in terms of, would that be reimbursable? Because part of the obligations, according to Doris Kitchu, and she's not here, she's on leave right now, is she said the way how FEMA, the recovery office have briefed her is that FEMA waits until we expend our local funds before they'll do any sort of reimbursement. They won't give us and put monies into they'll put monies into an account, but they won't give it to us until they see that the expense of it has been used toward
That's
what
normal.
they indicated.
My
Yeah,
question
yeah,
to you is, what money it's been a year.
Yeah.
What money were you going to use to pay for the FEMA repairs, for the repairs that you're seeking reimbursement from FEMA? What were you planning to use?
The most we could, as limited as a line agency, is our capital outlays and any monies that we
You
work
were
with
going to pay for
BBMR
2 million in
shortfalls,
FEMA repairs with
shortfalls.
150,000 in capital outlays, or were you given some emergency money from the 50 million that we passed for emergency funding were you going to be getting any of that to pay for your repairs and then get reimbursed by FEMA? You had no plan.
Yeah.
In other words, there was no source of funding to pay for Mawar repairs?
We're very tight and constrained and short because most of our
But you know that we gave
came-
50 million
Yeah.
to the governor, the Office of Civil Defense, to use for the typhoon, right? Emergency, 50 million that was supposed to be divvied up based on the needs of the agencies. And if you didn't get any of that, then this statement that DOC is a low priority is really appalling. It's been a low priority after the typhoon, low priority for DPW or GPA to even assess, let alone fix. It's been low priority now, despite the legislature by policy saying this is what we want to fund, this is what we want to move on. We're putting general fund money aside for new construction, and you're saying that's now a low priority. You're the first one to tell us that we're not going to build a new prison in the near future and that all the money will be spent on these other projects. That's shocking to me because that policy is supposed to be set here, and it was set here, and it's being completely ignored. And all the problems that you list about the prison, those were problems that we knew when we decided to build a new one. That's the same argument, except for the typhoon damages, of course. Those are new. But in the meantime, even the allocation of ARP funds, if you needed it for immediate emergencies, that money not being allocated to you is very surprising. We know for a fact that an additional 3.5 was used to purchase property for a new hospital. Condemnation 7 million, that's 7, 8, 9, 10.5 million. And that infrastructure alone is going to cost 100 million. So all these extra costs above the construction of a hospital are going towards the new hospital, while we still have to balance out the money we have for all these other priorities. Unless, I guess, they've not been a priority. When we were doing the budget, you said that's when you were meeting with the governor and telling her the condition of DOC and how urgent it was at that time. So despite there not being a request in the budget for this additional capital money, when BBMR came down here on the first day of our budget session and told us they have additional revenue that we should recognize, and they have additional expenses that we should use it on, DOC was not at all on that list. So I'm not sure if you're not making it clear to the governor that this was very urgent or not, or that they were just ignoring it until they get what they wanted first and put DOC last, or whether they still believe it's just not a priority, because BBMR has never come down and they've made a list of what we should fund, and they've never said not even one part of this list that you have should be funded as an urgent matter.
And Speaker, I think a lot of the priorities have really been on, and thanks to the Guam Legislature also, the funding for our recruits, to add more personnel to us, but it's a struggle too, also just to retain the corrections officers with the kind of situation that they're going through with the shortage of manpower and the rising population of pretrial inmates and stuff and all that. A lot of the priorities is getting our personnel back, because we're down to, I believe,
All right, so
less than 170.
yeah, we're trying to prioritize recruits as well.
Yeah.
Together with a new prison.
Yeah.
We were able to do that. It was balanced. However, if you're telling us now, and I guess I'm looking for the bottom line, the governor said low priority for DOC. Are you also saying low priority for a new DOC? Ignore that? Because if we ignore it now, apparently you guys want the 5 million, not the 1 million anymore for immediate needs, and that will be ignored for a long time. Once they tie up the bond borrowing, the debt ceiling for other projects like Simon Sanchez, a new hospital, we won't see a new prison for a long time. Yeah. So I don't even believe these fixes that you have listed here can last maybe over 5 years. So I'm not sure why that's that's the plan. That plan doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, I'd like to this time acknowledge the presence of Warden Alambora, who, for your information, colleagues, was sworn in by Sarge outside of the hall. So we're now going to proceed with round 2 of questions, starting with the back with the author who is not present. So Senator Fisher, you're recognized. Okay, Senator Fisher. Senator Tydegui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Borja, for also being here this morning with us, and of course, the team that was here yesterday. I appreciate you coming back and answering more questions. And it's obvious that my colleagues had some very good questions to ask you, and to try and figure out the urgency is what we're here today. Now, I know that, a lot of these questions could be answered during the public hearing, but there were only 4 people there at the public hearing, the chair, myself, and I think 2 other senators, and that was it. To listen to the issues that DOC is having. And if you listen to see the committee report, it explains it. So it's not like something all of a sudden today or yesterday was an issue with DOC. No, it has been going on. And the good author of this legislation brought it up to our attention, put this bill, made sure this bill came onto the session agenda for us to address, because you're sitting here today telling us it's an emergency. DOC is in a state of emergency today, and it's needed. Now, the only money that we can think of giving DOC right now is this money that was appropriated, because right now there's not enough to do the AE. And that money's going to sit there, collect dust or interest while people are suffering. And we can have every excuse and blame everybody in the sky and whose fault it is, or whether it's your fault or the governor's fault or whatever, this legislature's fault. It's not going to fix what we're having a problem with today. Now, when I talk about that money that is needed, we can't go and use excess revenue, because right now we're in a deficit on our CRER. As of October, we are negative because we've appropriated excess revenue in FY25, money that we didn't even see first, and we already appropriated that, and we're now in excess of a negative $5 million. So we need to find a solution today to help DOC. And then your press releases can come out and point fingers at who's to blame. But right now, there are people's lives that are at stake here. We're losing more officers because their families do not want them to work in conditions that DOC is experiencing today. And that's the issue. Where are you going to find the money right now? You can go and scream all you want to the governor, but her priorities, we already know what her priorities are, and it's not DOC. So we're here today to discuss at least $1 million, at least of that $5 million, and the opportunity to be reimbursed for it is there through FEMA. We're not stopping the train moving forward on a new facility that's desperately needed. There's no intention for this body, and I hope the next legislature that comes in that would stop that train. No, it's needed. And let's hope to God we can do that before we go into receivership. And the federal government comes in here and builds it for us, because we can't do it. And how is that going to be triggered? The conditions of what DOC is in today. That's what's going to trigger it. So let's stop pointing fingers and start doing something about it right now. Quit complaining. We found a solution, at least $1 million to start that boat rolling, and then we can continue in the next term, have an oversight of DOC and see exactly what's needed. Because it's obvious this administration doesn't care about DOC. But this body should. And we have the opportunity to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
See just Masi, Senator Taitigui. Senator Lujan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I exhausted my questioning yesterday. Thank you very much.
Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do have to say it's not a question of finger pointing, and I appreciate the presentation made by my good colleague, Senator Tello Taitigui. What concerns me, though it will not be my future burden, I certainly wish our colleagues that will continue on well. And I've been around long enough. This is an old story. And the concern I have, and I have to say I give credit to Department of Corrections. I give them credit for trying very desperately hard to move forward for the construction of a new facility. You don't need to see very far when you go to DOC that the need has been there. It's been there for a long time. My fear is that if this issue and the support for a new facility does not get addressed, we are going to continue to spiral downward. In this particular case, the construction, at least of phase 1 of a new facility, is absolutely critically necessary. We can resolve this issue for a week, a few months maybe 4 or 5 months, and this issue will come back, and the same situation will get repeated, and the situation will continue to deteriorate. So I think it is critical. Yes, by all means, the current administration is on the Hill. Then they need to be held accountable because there has been no priority put in place. And I agree with Speaker Terlahi. What they want. Everything else is left at the wayside, and something is critical because it is about the health and safety. And yes, I mean, I'm all for, people commit crimes, they should be held responsible and serve their time. But we also have to ensure they're treated humanely for the time that they're there. More importantly, I worry about the personnel and the people that work there. Because yes, I can't imagine, that's a tough job. We see the circumstances up there. We see those that even in the best of intentions walking in, when they are sworn in, they're bright-eyed and they have all the hope that they're going to do good things, and then I'm sitting and waiting. When's the next guard going to walk in smuggling drugs and other contraband? When's the next person that's going to get harmed? When's the next person that's going to get burned out? And I've had family members that have worked and retired at DOC for many years. I have very close friends that have worked at Department of Corrections. And I see and hear their concerns and fear. Thank God they're still alive and they're still here, but we know others that have not. So that's really the issue. We can try and band-aid this. We are not administrators here. Because if I was, I'd be up in arms right now if this was my operation. I'd be banging on everybody's door, be it the governor's door, Department of Administration, to get the paparetgui that I need. Whatever it is that I need for my operations, I would be there. But we are already in a crisis situation, and yes, we want to resolve it. We want to be able to give them the funds. But we also need to keep in mind we are doing it at the expense of money that was set aside to begin the process of building a new facility. And DOE was reasonable when they came to us. They didn't come and say, I want the whole castle. They actually presented, I was pleasantly surprised that they presented a proposal that was workable. They showed us their property, they showed us how they could build phase 1, they showed us what phase 1 would provide, and yet at the same time, simultaneously, we'll still be able to operate the prison and keep things going while the new phase 1 was in construction. And I give them credit because sometimes they come down here and everybody wants everything. But they were saying, hey, just please get us started with phase 1. And that's really what's happening here, colleagues. Yes, we can pass the $5 million. It ain't gonna last. The problems are deeper. You can put all the security cameras in there right now. It's not gonna address the major security concerns of that facility. Imagine you're the guard standing there with your rifle all day waiting. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? I've got how many people I gotta worry about that have all day to plot and plan. So it's not a question of the emergency. I take no responsibility for the administration of the Department of Corrections. If I'm the director, then by all means, I'm ready. If I'm responsible, by all means, I have to take that responsibility. That's on the hands and the shoulders of you, Mr. Berdallo, Director Berdallo. That's your responsibility. We can only provide the funding. I'm just saying that taking this particular This dollars and cents since the very beginning was my main concern, because we are moving down the possibility of the construction of a new facility, at least phase one, that is very critically needed. And I would encourage you, Director Badalio, to seek your federal partner and start putting the Fino English in the paper and actually make a case and an argument as to why, with the military buildup, Department of Corrections needs additional funds to construct a new facility for the safety of this community. They're out there, they're waiting. Even if it's not everything, but if any funds that they can dedicate to help facilitate, because I am concerned. In the next few years, we will have less revenue coming in. This is only the beginning. And I've lived through the times of having to cut salaries and cut work hours here in this body. And I really never wanted to see that again. That's why I was very concerned about the amount of money being spent. I love a pay raise too. I've never gotten anything beyond a 4% increment to the exact same job. But I worried about the ability to sustain that payment, because people plan their lives around their revenue and what they have coming in. Long-term commitments, it could be a mortgage, it could be a new car, it could be something, education for their children, or whatever the case may be. But things are going to get tight, and then tough decisions have to be made. Thank goodness this round it will not be mine. But we need to make responsible decisions. In this particular case, like I said, there's nothing sexy about advocating, oh, we need a new Department of Corrections. It's not as exciting as building other things. But at the same time, it's an absolute necessity because of the circumstance of our society. We have some bad players out there that we need to keep away from the public, or punish because of what they've done, that they've committed such heinous crimes that have harmed this community. They should not be out walking free. And so that, to me, is the main issue. And you know what? If I vote for this, and now that I look at your concerns, I recognize it, but Director Berdalio, this issue about Tadze Paparegui, that's your responsibility. You've got $45 million that you start in the first quarter of this fiscal year. That's a procurement issue as far as I'm concerned. So that's your job to make sure you get those basic supplies that your people and the inmates need at Department of Corrections. But I think we need to recognize, maybe not this administration in the remaining 24 months, maybe it has to be whoever the next governor of Guam's going to be. But this is a critical need, and I support your efforts. And I'm also telling you, please recognize that while you're dealing with the famine side of the situation today, you really need to work, Director Berdalio, with your current administration and find out what initiatives or efforts they're going to put forth to begin phase one of your prison, because it's desperately needed. It really is. It's not, oh, we don't want new things, but in your particular circumstance, out of what we need to build, and yes, we need to build more schools, we need to build a new hospital, but we definitely need to address, for security reasons and the safety of this community, the construction of a new facility. So I don't have anything more to add from there. I mean, that burden is yours, that responsibility is yours, and I hope you're able to argue your case effectively, because we see how the administration can move with what they want. With what the governor wants, oh my gosh, lightning speed. We're even willing to condemn people's property. But something that is not as sexy and exciting, maybe not as much a priority, even though it's a tremendous need for the community, gets left by the wayside, and that's unfortunate, because I don't see your circumstance getting better until that new facility, at least phase one, is put into construction. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you again, Department of Correction, for taking their time and once again this morning and coming down to answer our questions. Thank you.
Senator Brown. Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the panel. I just have one question. I guess I want to follow up with the procurement. And you had mentioned it was stuck at GSA. So, Ms. Romo, if you can, talk about the problems that you're facing, and perhaps we can, hopefully come to a solution.
So we received notice that we needed to use the ARPA funds, I believe by November 27 deadline, or else it would go to the new hospital. So we provided the requisitions to GSA, and was also provided guidance on how to put it into the new system, because the ARPA funds account is a fiscal year 24 budget, and it wasn't accepting it in the system. So we reached out to GSA and was advised that we can prepare the requisition using the current fiscal year budget. and just provide an AOE. But yesterday morning, I received an email from GSA, and they told me that they could not do it on their end. And we had to cancel all the requisitions that we prepared using the ARPA funds and resubmit. But I spoke to our GSA buyer and advised her that we couldn't do that because it was a fiscal year 24 budget and it wasn't going to roll over. So I told her to seek guidance from DOA on how we're supposed to move forward in getting those requisitions and using the ARPA funds and not our fiscal year 25 budget.
Okay, so basically you were planning to use the ARPA funds before the deadline. You sent it in on time.
Yes.
And then you got word that it was not accepted.
Yes.
Because
the system
failed.
The GSA system wouldn't allow them to do it on their end as well.
Okay, so have you spoken to DOA?
So prior to us preparing the requisition, I did reach out to DOA and they told me it was a GSA situation that had to be resolved on their end.
Okay, this sounds like you're getting the runaround.
Yes.
But DOA is, to my knowledge, is the one that's in charge of the system. Is that correct? So I guess maybe identifying what the issue, you're saying the issue is the FMIS system?
Yes.
And they're saying it's GSA's is the one that's at fault, not the system.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it sounds like you're getting the runaround when in fact you did everything in your power
Yes.
to get it done.
Yes.
So, and then in the meantime, you're not getting toilet paper
Yes.
and other things, and so the
Well,
staff.
I believe yesterday we did receive those. That purchase order, I believe, was fulfilled yesterday. But I want them to use the ARPA funds and not our fiscal year 25 budget. So that's why we created the AOEs for them to do on their back end.
Okay, and I guess if you don't, advocate for it, then you lose those funds.
Yes. But
you did everything. You did everything
yes.
by the book.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's unfortunate because ultimately it's the DOC who has to suffer the consequences, and you did everything in your power by the book.
And Senator, I want to add that this morning when I checked my email, Fisher, the Deputy Director of DOA, is aware of the situation. She committed to working with GSA and honoring the requisitions that we submitted. So she's working on that.
Okay.
That's from the email I got this morning.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that. I'm hoping that this resolves quickly so you can get the needed materials. And especially when you're looking at, fixing the generators, replacing generators, air conditions, is there any recommendations by GSA to kind of expedite this process? Is it more of an administrative thing, or is it a statute thing?
All I can say is, from the beginning when they changed out of the AS400 new system, I mean, there's just been some challenges every now and then with our staff had to be trained in this. Roma came from Guam Community College. She really is a real quick learner in getting into this, understanding the system and some of the challenges that happen with DOA and GSA and some of these kind of situations. But sometimes it's about that technology, where the entire DOA and everything in their system had to change from the AS400 to this new system and procurement.
So you're saying other than that, it ran smoother as far as procurement?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so because if you want to, we're here because we want to assist DOC to address this emergency, this crisis within DOC. And we also need to make sure procurement is in step, in addition to finding you more funds, because I think ultimately we need to rebuild the prison, but also in the meantime, there's an interim, measures that we need, stopgap measures that we need to also implement to ensure that you're getting the air conditions. I mean, air conditions, generators, what have you, that's failing, right, in the prisons. Okay, so I think that's really what I wanted to follow up with is procurement, and please know that my door is always open if you have any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cedros Masi, Senator Perez, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the panel thing. Thank you for being here again this morning. So, Carter, how much of the ARP funds were you allocated, and how much were you able to spend?
So I don't have the original, but I know we had to spend $79,315.57.
Okay, and so you've got about $79,000 worth of requests already down at GSA that just hasn't moved. There's an issue there, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Bordalio, have you or your staff already in anticipation of receiving some funds, have you already started to prioritize and schedule, how you're going to spend this money if you were to get it?
Senator, I've had a meeting with DPW, and part of the information I gave you on these priorities, I've had the assurance with the assistance of DPW to come up with a scope of work to make it easier so that if this money is the flexibility to release it to us for the dome project and everything that I described on the priorities, the generators, that it would be a smoother process to ensure that when the monies, should the governor sign, of course, I think the governor will sign it into law on this legislation. There'll be a quick plan to have a scope of work and place it so that majority of what was indicated in these projects could be taken care of and addressed.
Will you be adverse to be able to provide this body with a update?
No, Senator. I'll keep everyone.
Fred, I guess my concern is in providing you the funding, whatever the funding ends up to be, is that, and there has been instances where we provide the funding because it's a crisis, because it's an emergency, but then it sits there and nothing happens. And then the emergency, the crisis compounds itself because you didn't address it. And, then the matter gets worse. I just want some assurances.
You have my assurance that we'll be providing a progress report and expenditures of the monies that are released from this legislation once it's signed into law.
Okay.
So,
Would the information that you had provided to us yesterday in the form of all the different problems, would this come as a surprise to the governor?
No, she's been briefed, and then the chief of staff of the governor has this priority also, keeping the governor briefed of our plan of action.
When was the first time you briefed them of this?
It was, I think, when it was mentioned, several weeks ago.
Several weeks ago?
Several weeks ago.
A lot of these problems look like they've been there for more than several weeks. In fact, the bulk of these problems were there for the bulk of the several weeks. What I'm trying to get at is I'm also stumped that we're very lucky that there's at least $5 million. Okay? Really. 20 years ago, in this same body, you'd be glad if you even got $500,000, much less 50, because money was tight. And money is going to get tighter. Okay? And as was articulated and was expressed by a couple of my colleagues, if the Department of Corrections was truly a priority of this administration, which obviously it's not, many of these issues you wouldn't have to be able to address. You know, because I need to go back a couple things. First off, you already know your A&E is going to cost you $16 million. How'd you get that information? Did you pay for it? And with whose money? And when you got the information that it's $16 million, why is it that we just find out yesterday that it's $16 million? Where were you going to get it? Which makes it easier for me to say, okay, we've got the money, and if it's not going to be the priority until somebody over there says it's going to be a priority and where this money is going to be coming from, then yes, okay, fix these issues. So, first question, had you not come to this body because it's not part of this bill, how do you intend to pay for the $2 million that you're going to, in FEMA, in repairs associated with Typhoon Mawar? How did you intend to pay for it? Stop the clock because I'm waiting for him to ask.
Well, Doris, again, the one who's coordinating with FEMA, you're asking how we would be able to come up with fixing all those discrepancies and from what Typhoon Mawar?
No, you got $2 million.
Yeah.
You're going to have, okay? And recognizing that there is a process that you could utilize prioritizing your projects so that you can roll monies over depending on what your cost share is with FEMA. But what money did you set aside to even start that process, or have you set aside money for that?
I believe we don't have money set aside to address Typhoon Mawar, you know, the damages and the projects that that FEMA is communicating with us, with some that they have questions about, especially the
I understand the whole
continental.
process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay. You can do $2 million worth of projects with $200,000. It's just you got to roll them over. My concern here is, as it was presented earlier, this body provided the administration with $50 million to be able to assist with FEMA costs. Was DOC, were you ever invited, was it ever discussed with you from the administration of what DOC's financial needs are to deal with its FEMA costs?
To my knowledge, I've had no information in terms of what monies would be available for Department of Corrections for whatever damages and claims that DOC had for Mawar, because I came in 2023 after Mawar. I don't know whether previous officials at Department of Corrections may have had that
that money would not have been made available till after Mawar, okay? The $50 million. You know, Mr. Berdalio, I would suggest as well, have a meeting with them real quick, okay? Because, you know, as was stated yesterday by the warrant, okay, I don't want, you know, the $5 million is for those areas that you're not going to get FEMA reimbursements, okay? And if you were to use that for the FEMA reimbursements, knowing that there was a pot of money available, it's going to take away from you all. So I'm giving you some little suggestions to maximize the effort here, okay? And so I would appreciate if, again, if you, whatever pot of money, come up with you know, what your plan is, and then give us a schedule, because, again, Fred, I don't want to see this money languish, okay?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate your support to give us the $5 million from this.
I didn't say $5 million. I said whatever money you get. Don't
Okay,
put words in
thank
my
you.
mouth.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks a lot, Fred. You're good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sidus Masi, Senator Blas. Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and thank you once again to the panel. Thank you, Mr. Borja, for joining us as well this afternoon, or this morning, excuse me. You know, I think we've exhausted the questions, really. I just want to make a few comments. A little over a year ago, and many of us today have shared our fears on the floor here, and a little over a year ago, I remember being up at Leo Palace and seeing this wonderful graduation. I think at least 3 members that are in this hall today were there. I've been to a lot of graduation ceremonies for law enforcement. I got to say this was one of the more special ones that I've been to. Everyone was extremely professional. Every one of those professionals looked excited to get to work. But the one thing I remember from the individual from the class who was to give remarks, I remember him saying and asking his families to forgive them. And now that we're in the holiday season, the forgiveness he was asking for is the fact that they probably won't be there for Christmas. They probably won't be there for New Year's. And throughout the year, they won't be there for many occasions. Sometimes they won't even be there for christenings of their loved ones. They may not be there for wedding receptions. And my fear is, if we don't do something, and we don't continue doing something, Fred, under your tenure and your leadership and in your entire team, that there will not be people willing to step up anymore to do that job. That's my fear. Individuals who have committed a crime, been convicted of a crime, in this case, sometimes just charged, have to do the time. And it doesn't mean a hotel or ideal accommodations, but it means reasonable accommodations. But I go back to the people who are in charge of the care and custody of those individuals who I care the most deeply for. And that is why we're here today. Fred, I think you're going to be spending a lot of time with us. And rightly so. In the coming months and coming couple of years. You've got a plan. You've got a wonderful plan. I agree with the retiring speaker from Orda Salampago that, yeah, absolutely. It's not sexy to go out there and break ground on a prison. There's not going to be popping bottles of champagne and, look at us, what we're doing. But government's job, the fundamental job of a government, is to provide resources to these key agencies to operate properly within the parameters of the law and what we hold dear in our democracy to be proper. You have all those tools. So yeah, we may not be celebrating like we've changed the world, but we'll be celebrating when we finally get to that, and we need to get to it post-haste, that we're moral and that we do our job. So the author of this legislation today had a prior commitment that he's at, and he's asked me to relay a couple of messages. One is that hopefully we will be able to rise, and I will make that motion if it's in order. And when we rise, I will be making an amendment to delete the proposed $1 million and to restore the $5 million appropriation that was enumerated in this bill. You did what I asked you to do yesterday, Fred. You put it on the record unequivocally that right now, with the dire state that you're in, you absolutely need this $5 million. I would like to mention something to Ms. Okada, and please, I think this communication would be in order, that should this appropriation pass and be signed into law, you will be demonstrating good faith and effort to expend on those projects that are currently outstanding and hopefully win the favor with a solid funding source of due consideration by those federal partners under FEMA that will be reviewing what you've done. Fred, I also, I don't think it's too late sometimes. I also implore you to go through with Mr. Bora and your staff and do everything that you can to document, if there's not full documentation of the efforts that you've made to Band-Aid that facility together and to do whatever you've done to prove to them that you've tried your best. Because that's what they're going to need to show that you had some solid maintenance of effort. And then we can do our job here, and we can compel Homeland Security and the governor's office to do their job and work through our congressmen and whatever it takes to see that we can get reimbursed at whatever level. For whatever reason, there was a disconnect possibly on the issue with Mawar and the $50 million that was available. That's water under the bridge right now. But you know you have Iraq, and you know you have those people you need. I also ask you to meet with them. Get a sit rep on what happened there and how we're going to continue of operations. I know your capabilities, Fred. This is in your wheelhouse. So I'm putting that on the record to say that, you know, all of us now, what we can celebrate is we've stepped up, we've given you the money, and hopefully your report back to us in weeks and months to come is, I've been a good steward of those funds. I'm getting positive traction on reimbursements because that money is coming back to the government of Guam. That money will replenish the general fund, whether at 90% or waived all the way up to 100%. So you will be doing your due diligence to restore the general fund through your work and your efforts. I pray that will happen. I pray that we will see the wisdom today to remove the amendment, give you the $5 million, and then hold you accountable. And I'm praying that you're going to have a favorable report to us. And in this Christmas season, I think this is the least that we can do for you and for the people of Guam. Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair.
Sidus Masi, Senator Duenas. Colleagues, let's take a short recess. Colleagues, we're back from recess, concluding our second round of questions for the panel. Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Jesus Masi. So, we're looking at what other funding sources can DOC use for its immediate repairs and renovations so that it doesn't tap into the $5 million that's been put there to build the new prison, right? To begin the A&E, to build the new prison. Because once you use it, I cannot see that anybody will believe anymore that it's a priority, right? That new prison. But we were convinced not too long ago in 2021 that that was an absolute priority. We should put any money that we could towards it. And we actually were able to do that this fiscal year. And using that will commit us to moving forward with the A&E, with the construction in the phases as lined up. But removing that, I feel, will have the opposite effect. It will signal to everyone that, yes, it's a priority, but it's not really a priority, and we need to use the money for other things, and let's use the money for other things. So I'm, trying to avoid that because we've seen this with the government. I mean, it's a miracle to me that DOC got funding for a new prison. That is huge. It's never been done in decades. And it's been needed for decades since the last consent decree. It's been needed. But it's very hard to convince people because, it's hard to convince people. That's why I'm so impressed that they were able to convince all of us that we need a new prison. So to go back on that now and say, we need it, but we're going to cannibalize ourselves, our money for the new prison, just to feed ourselves currently. That's kind of what DOC is being forced to do. And that is embarrassing as a government, that's what you're being asked to do. Come down here, beg for the money for your new prison to take care of your immediate safety needs. Immediate. And why couldn't they find any additional ARP money? You're only talking about, was it $79,000 in ARP money that you're trying to spend? $79,000. It's nothing. No infrastructure money dedicated to DOC. No Typhoon Mawar money dedicated to DOC. Can you confirm that, Chief, please? Did DOC apply for and receive any Typhoon Mawar money?
I just confirmed from Doris Kichichu, who says our programmer and is coordinating with Office of Recovery and Homeland Security, and she said we don't have any established account for any $2 million that's needed to start off that process of ensuring that any of our damages that we've claimed for FEMA and the projects are going to be used, and then there'll be a process for reimbursement.
Thank you. So you've been going back and forth with FEMA, trying to confirm that they will reimburse what you spend on fixing the prison as a typhoon expense for $2 million, but yet our own government has not ever given you the $2 million to actually make the repairs that FEMA requires. You're supposed to make those repairs, then apply for reimbursement. But somebody up there has determined either that they don't feel you're a priority again. It's very mixed messages. Actually, maybe they've never said DOC is a priority. Maybe they've never, because it's always come from the legislature. It was the legislature that said build a new prison. It was the prison that said your long-time officers there who came up, who gave us a plan, right? They took the initiative. They got us a plan, an actual plan. They went that far, and they got us convinced, or they convinced us. I feel like that's a huge feat. I do not want to see that go backwards. So I just can't understand why we can't use the money that was dedicated for the typhoon for your $2 million. And if you get reimbursed by FEMA, then you'll have 90% of that to use for the next repair, Or apply for more than $2 million, and even if it's not reimbursable, it's typhoon damage, get it. If it's immediate needs because of COVID, you need a new dome. I can't understand why we can't use ARP funds for that, and that we're talking about 79,000 instead of 4 million or whatever you want today, so that you don't cannibalize your funds that have been dedicated for your new prison. That's like GMH being put on hold for years to make repairs because they want to make sure that we know they're in desperate need for a new hospital. It's silly. We even tried to force money to GMH because they never requested for capital improvement projects since I became a senator. You know, only this last year they changed their budget style. So you guys cannot make that same mistake. You cannot come down in budgets and say, we don't need any capital improvement when you need it. And you need to start saying, because we're building the new prison, it's going to take 5 years, and in the 5 years, this is what we need to take us through 5 years. And I think we need to be clear. The repairs that you're making, I mean, some of it goes to it says safety supply. I just don't think those are intended to last beyond 5 years. And in 5 years, you will not have a new prison if you take this $5 million away from your A&E today. Because we have seen this with Simon Sanchez, how long it takes between your agency, DPW, the contractors to get even the A&E done. We cannot wait. You cannot wait. I don't know. While we give you money for new officers, I do not feel comfortable that we are sending them without the promise of a new facility. Because if that's what we feel, nobody's motivated to get a new facility, then I just feel bad for these new officers, and I feel like, why would they choose DOC? We have to, at the very least, show them that's what we're going to do. We are going to move on that new prison. That's a commitment. It's not a floating commitment, and it's a policy, yes, driven by the legislature, because it's obviously not driven by the administration right now. But what perplexes me is, while they might not want to build a new prison, why would they not give you the money for your immediate needs if this has been going on since Typhoon Mawar? At the very least, but the overcrowding's been going on forever. And even when we approved a new prison, we knew we had to get through that construction period. So you were sent down here to request a budget that didn't include any of this. They came down and said, we need an additional budget that did not include any of this. None of the money for the typhoon has been dedicated to any of this. None of the money for ARP, except for maybe 79,000, has been dedicated to this. That is not convincing to me. That I don't know, where's that gap? Like, you are the cabinet member unable to convince the governor that this is a need. This is an immediate need. We've got transfer authority of 750,000. That's large compared to the amount of ARP funds you're looking at. And it's large compared to the zero that you're getting from Typhoon Mawar, or the lack of any money from any infrastructure funding. Nothing. So I very much hear you. I do not dispute your need. I do not dispute your accounting of it. What I dispute is that we are going to take the $5 million that's dedicated for a new prison today, right now, and can be dedicated to A&E, and use that for A&E, and instead move that and use it for these other expenses that can be paid from these other sources. And I feel for your team that's been back and forth with FEMA, disputing whether they're going to reimburse the $2 million while you haven't even received the $2 million to spend. That's amazing to me. I was very upset after the typhoon. The mayors were upset. I just feel like DOC should be yelling as loud as we are, that is not acceptable. And that's the thing, it's a hospital is very much needed. A new prison is very much needed. I don't think we have to say we're only going to do the hospital and not the new prison. I think there are ways to do that. They just have to be motivated, and you guys have to put your feet down and not allow backwards, because I feel like if you lose that in this fiscal year, you cannot guarantee you're going to get that in the future. But if you commit that in this fiscal year towards the A&E and you actually begin, then it's committed, and we are committed, and we are moving forward, or we waste our money, right? As opposed to what one of my colleagues suggested, that we will be here every single year with capital improvements for you, beyond 5 years, because by then there is no hope for a new prison. But we can do both, and I just think you should insist that we're going to do both for the health and the safety of your officers, for the threat of receivership, which will be extremely more expensive when we can do it for what we've got right now. So I guess that's my spiel, Mr. Chair. Thank you. But thank you for all your work, all of you.
Madam Speaker, that concludes our second round, but I did want to give an opportunity for the panel to make any comments before we dismiss them. Warden?
Yes. Good morning, Senator, Mr. Chair. I apologize for not attending yesterday's hearing, trying to run a prison. But here I am. I did visit the live session. I was watching it. And I'm here for the men and women in the Department of Corrections who's been through this, through thick and thin. I've seen everything laid out on the table. Yesterday's hearing, everything has been laid out. A lot of our shortfalls have been exposed. And in one way or another, we've been educated in how to move about and move forward. The bottom line is we do need a new prison, okay? Now, if I'm sure that it can be built tomorrow, then by all means, let's retract this bill. But of course, that's not the case. I'm just reaching out, asking your help to provide some form of relief and safeguard our staff and the clients that we service. Because right now, we're in a crisis. We are in dire straits. Thank you, Senator Nicholas, for appearing. So, I'm not going to rehash everything that was said yesterday. I believe the staff here did a wonderful job in drawing a picture of our dilemma up at the Department of Corrections. I did come down here again because I'm kind of like in awe that we're still haggling back and forth about the new prison and where's this money going to come from. Let's not forget that this money is to make immediate changes to how we operate up there. Whether it comes from this bill or not, we actually need your help. The Department of Corrections is in a dire strait. And I'm talking on behalf of the men and women that serve this island and try to keep these prisoners at bay. It's a daunting task, but we are up for it. We're up to it. We just need your help. And again, indeed, we do need a new prison. Where the money comes from, I don't really care. I don't. Just get us something, whether it be minimal or, the maximum amount. But we do need some help. Again, officers are digging into their pockets to buy these necessities, toilet tissues. I know they said that yesterday, but I need to really emphasize that the Department of Correction, the men and women there, are doing everything in their power to prevent a riot, an uprising. And I hope that these simple words that I'm conveying to you is enough to make a decision, whether in our favor or not, but at least we're given the opportunity to voice our concerns. Okay? I've been in corrections 39 years. I've seen it all. Maybe the lack of, the problem here is a change of leadership within this administration. I think going on 8 years, we've had 3-4 directors. So Mr. Fred Berdali is just picking up the ball. Okay, and I implored him, I begged him to help us, and which is what he's doing, Because my main function is trying to sustain order up there in the prison. I can't be running around and seeking assistance from the senators or the governor. Again, that's my director's job to prostitute himself and get us this support. Okay, so again, I came down here today. I was thinking that everything is easy peasy, but as I reviewed that footage yesterday, I'm like, I think I need to show face here. Out of respect to the men and women of the Department of Corrections. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sijus Masi Warden Borja, Director Rudaya.
Good morning, Senators. Again, I just want to wish all the Senators here a Merry Christmas, a safe holiday season. As we're going into the Christmas season, of course, one of the biggest concerns I've had, and this is when we first came here to answer some of the questions that are on the minds of you Senators in terms of this change, that this legislation reflects the TAP money that was meant for the new prison, but to use it toward the most urgent needs currently over at the Department of Corrections that the warden he encounters as the one in charge of all the security operations, and he's the one who bears the brunt, and the uniform officers there facing each and every single day, risking their lives as they're going, and we're even losing some corrections officers who don't want to work in a, they go over to the marshals or other places where they won't have to be in a facility where it is increasing in 500 some pretrial detainees, right, that haven't even been tried yet for their crimes and stuff and all that, and taking care of that overflow. And as I said, when I addressed and provided the information on what we intend to use for this, one of the most important things, the DOME project, which the warden is going to be involved in, because if you look in the picture, says 1,000 words about a dome, you know, a tent. Every typhoon, anytime a typhoon comes, we don't know when the next one's going to happen. And he moves that population of pretrial into the visiting area. And so we don't know whether that could happen 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. And it's such a, you know, I've worked in 3 corrections facilities. I'd never been in an area where you don't have control of movement with the security systems that the warden wants to work towards with an immediate fix, because he knows that as we get the monies for these projects and the security systems and the camera systems and other things that we've even put in, because right now inmates are washing using hand wash. They don't have the washer and dryers, and they're breaking up. That includes that in equipment, and even on the language where it says properties, you know, we're not intending to get land properties, but the properties were in the context is what we're saying is items and properties that are valuable to ensuring security of the prison. It sometimes feels like a letdown that people might say, well, the money was really meant for a brand new prison, and it was very convincing to the lawmakers to do that. I wasn't here in 2021, you know, I wasn't here in the public safety domain when that happened, but I'm sure it's still in our strategic plan. You know, if you go into the website, you see we do envision and a goal is, and I invite all the public to look at that, a modernized prison system. But there were challenges I mentioned in that strategic plan. The challenges that we had with the overpopulation, the challenges we have with a shortage of personnel, and the sort of challenges we have that the warden faces and we all face. It's just a miracle, as I said, that nothing has major happened. The last major incident that happened really several months ago was a firearm snuck into our facility, and that was recovered quickly. Last time we remember that was way back when the Andriatico situation, where some inmates were hurt and are contraband and like that, and that shows where there's some vulnerabilities that we have, you know, in our facility. With the security systems in place, we get this with the immediate needs of this funding that's going to be available. I'm sure and I have confidence that each and every one of you as senators are going to be very deliberate in looking at supporting the Department of Corrections. And I'm confident, of course, as it gets passed with the monies that we're talking about we need for these projects, that the support from the governor would be there in terms of getting this immediately signed. So, and a progress, as I committed earlier, a progress report will be made on what we can accomplish and achieve with this funding. Thank you. So just Masi.
Si Jus Masi, Director Berdalio. Colleagues, we're just going to take a short recess to allow the panel to leave, and then we'll proceed with the third round for amendments and comments. Colleagues, we're back. Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to rise out of the committee of the whole and proceed back, as we rise out, proceed back to the discussions that we were having based on the amendment that was proffered.
So Senator Blas has made a motion to rise out of the committee of the whole and resume discussion on the amendment that we were discussing prior to going into the committee of the whole. On that motion, is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Colleagues, let's give the staff a little bit of time to adjust the room.
We will resume discussions. Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the rising from the Committee of the Whole. The motion to accept the recommendation of the Committee of the Whole.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker, we rose out of the Committee of the Whole to resume a discussion on the amendment that we were discussing.
Sijus Masi for that report from the Committee of the Whole. Our discussion was on an amendment that was passed out, and at the time that we went into Committee of the Whole, Senator Frank Blas had the floor on the amendment that was proffered by Senator San Nicolas. So we all should have copies. Senator Blas, you continue to have time, and you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the colleagues for having to endure the Committee of the Whole, but I thought that it was necessary so that we can basically hash out the information as the amendment that is being proffered substantially reduces the appropriated amount from $5 million to $1 million. I think one of the things that was very adamant, that was very clear, brought on by the presentation by the Department of Corrections personnel, was that whether it was $5 million or $1 million, they need money. And they need the money because, let's put it very bluntly, the administration has failed to heed their concerns, has failed to listen to them, failed to provide an iota of assistance to be able to deal with the crisis, as they have termed it, that exists at the Department of Corrections. We heard of the horrid conditions that not just the detainees, the prison inmates have to endure, but the working conditions that are brought on by the hardworking men of the Department of Corrections, trying to do the very best of what they got. You know, when it comes down to them having to even to fork out their own money to be able to provide some the basic hygienic supplies to the inmates, or for themselves for that matter, in this condition. First off, you were talking about a workspace that less than 1% of the population would want to be able to work in. And for them to have to live under those conditions, as many times as has been brought up by the officers, the men and women of the Department of Corrections, it apparently has fell on deaf ears. And so they had no choice but to come before this body, come before the author himself to ask for help. Okay? As I had mentioned in the Committee of the Whole, lucky thing we're in these times, okay, where the discussion is between $5 million and $1 million. Not too long ago, we couldn't even have that discussion because there was no money. And yet, when you have an administration that says that, oh, we've got more money than, we've got enough money to be able to take care of our needs as well as provide all the bonuses, incentives, and everything else that they provided because we have it, and yet you had them come before us and the very basic necessities that they need. They came before us to be able to get them out of the hole. You know, I, for one, whether it was $5 million or $1 million, I was very much concerned because it was not too long ago that Department of Corrections came before us and said we need some assistance, some help in being able to build a new prison. They came with a great plan, a plan that we hope that can be epitomized, can be used as the template for, in case other agencies come before us, with their master plan. And now they've been forced to ask us to reconsider. As much as they would want to build the prison in the future, they have basic needs today. Does that conversation sound familiar? Like I said, you can change out 3 letters. You can change out DOC to GMH. You can change out corrections to healthcare. It seems to be par for the course for this administration. But it's here nor there. Let's discuss this now. Again, as much as I had major reservations of utilizing this money because it was going to go towards progress, I have to sit down and seriously think about whether or not we can, that this money now has to be used for something, for things that should have been covered, but weren't. And if you're going to put the onus on us to have to make that decision, I'm not going to let another day pass where you're going to put the health of an inmate, much less the life of a corrections officer, in jeopardy because of the conditions that we are allowing them, that we are forcing them to live under, to work under. It's an embarrassing day today. But I'm glad we had those discussions in the Committee of the Whole. So with that, I'll still ponder my decision on this. And thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Sijusmasi, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the amendment.
Sijusmasi, Madam Speaker, and good morning again to my colleagues and the people of Guam. So, we came in here on this bill, and the decision in front of us was, give DOC the $5 million set aside for the new prison. And now, as I stand here today after Committee of the Whole and all the information and really revelations that came out of the panel, really the decision for me has become much larger than what I thought it was. And the decision for me now is, are we going to build a new prison or not? I've heard some of my colleagues say that this money is not coming from a savings account, but we're treating it like one. Because, and any families out there who are paycheck to paycheck, you got a certain amount of money set aside for whatever it may be. Once you start touching that money, you get used to it. And so while initially the decision was, hey, are we going to take this $5 million? It's very clear from what the director has said that the building of a new prison is nowhere near the priority radar for the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. And it's been very frustrating. It's been very frustrating as the chairman of public safety with oversight over the Department of Corrections, because I have tried my best, my dear people of Guam. But unfortunately, as we see in so many other agencies, it's like politics has paralyzed the progress that needs to be made. And I say this because, whether it's Director Berdalio or his predecessor, Director Carbolito, who I remember we've had the oversight hearings on DOC, and it's always the same thing. Does the governor know? Oh, they're aware. Did you ask the governor for assistance? They're aware. Is it a state of emergency at DOC? No. It's like we can't even get these directors to admit, and it's, very refreshing to hear Director Berdallo, but it's been very frustrating because you just feel like they're almost scared to tell the governor what's happening at DOC. I told Major Lizama, Lastama, it's more better we send the warden and the major up to talk to the governor. Sangani minagahit, tell them the truth. Because it almost seems like these directors are too scared to mention any priority. Because if it's not the construction, the condemnation, relative to the new hospital, it's almost like our governor and lieutenant governor don't want to hear it. And so now they put it on us. It's like I told the panel, Kalampak Gumadzuti, it's like DOC is the forgotten child of the government of Guam. And we play musical directors, different directors, same situation. I started my radio broadcast career in 1998. And the first live remote broadcast that I did was at the Department of Corrections. And guess what we talked about? The same thing we're talking about today. And that was 26 years ago. And so when we say that it's not politically synexy to construct a new prison or even to bail out the prison from its current problems, that goes to show it's absolutely true. Because we've been there and done that with the receivership. And I took a tour of DOC, and honestly, I am dumbfounded on how we are not in a receivership right now with the conditions that not only these inmates and detainees are enduring, which I think at this point rise to cruel and unusual punishment, but also the risks to the lives of these hardworking corrections officers. And all the while, the governor and lieutenant governor absolutely have the means and the ways to assist DOC. So for me, this decision is not only are we discussing putting a $5 million Band-Aid on DOC's current problems, we are basically, if we decide that, throwing away the thought of a new prison and leaving it for whoever the next governor, lieutenant governor will be. And I shudder to think if that's the administration's play with the construction of a new Simon Sanchez as well. Because it's very frustrating to hear, you hear it, no deficit, $1 billion budget, but what do we hear in here? It's constant crisis management. Over and over for 2 years. Does the governor know? Is the governor aware? Did you talk to the governor? Yes, 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 Lao, no. GPD. Issues with funding, issues with vehicles. GDOE, GMH, DOC, it's like my colleague said, just change out the letters of the agency, and it's the same thing. Yet the administration continues to contort itself just so it can pat itself on the back. While we here in the legislature hear the true state of the government of Guam. We here at the legislature are thrust in front of the train, tied to the tracks to make the decisions that the governor and lieutenant governor lack the political will to make. And I feel for these corrections officers, the corrections family who, after they share the concerns with the director and he goes up there and, it's kalantanga, they don't hear it. It's falling on deaf ears, blind eyes. Unless you're talking to them about a new hospital, they don't hear it. So hearing after hearing, what is the administration going to do? Because we can do a whole lot down here, but you guys know, unless the political will is there, we're not going to get anywhere. Kalen, stand still.
And so we really need to weigh very carefully this decision, which is beyond simply voting yes or no on this bill. Because you know, if they get this $5 million and zero out that savings account or whatever we're going to call it, who's going to get the blame for that? Who are they going to blame when they say, oh, we've been trying to build a new prison and the legislature tatlo? So we need to decide very carefully over the 1 million, the 5 million, because you know, this governor, lieutenant governor will out-stubborn us. I don't know how many times we've been in here like a broken record. The governor can do it with ARP. The governor can do it with the transfer authority. But I know I'm not the only colleague in here who I'm afraid for DOC. Because they're coming down here with their badge in their hand and asking us for help, and you hear how they're so desperate to be heard. They come to the people's house because they can't even get into the door at Adelup. And it was so compelling what Major Lizama and Warden Borja said to us. How do you listen to that and then vote no or, you know, don't provide the million? It's a very tough decision. But part of me feels like if we do nothing, they'll do nothing. They're already doing nothing. But it's not sexy because we're talking about forgotten people who have committed crimes. Equa, I'm dumbfounded. I didn't even know what to say the first two rounds. Just hearing all of these things the director's talking about, you know, and then we want to believe that if we give this money to DOC as a Band-Aid, because now if Alatsay funds, I don't know when we're going to have the opportunity to build a new prison. I don't know when the account will be up to pay the A&E. Who knows? But for me, it seems like we're going to give this million or this 5, and DOC is going to do their little repairs here and there, and then, like they said, they're going to be back here next year. And we have tried. I've asked Director Carbolito, please, put it inside your budget. Put it inside your budget, and I will fight for you. I told that to Director Carbolito. I told that to Director Berdazzo. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I said, no, tell us what you need exactly. But instead, what happens, you have our DOC staff who are so desperate to improve these conditions that they're writing letters out there soliciting for donation. Because the governor, lieutenant governor are too stingy to open their purse and help the Department of Corrections, and they have to come all the way here to the legislature. And it's like they're begging us just to be heard. I know they can hear us down the road. But like I said, this is a decision, you know, very significant decision. Do we give this money now? Especially if we give the 5. That's it, pants it. In a way, we'll be saying, okay, yeah, we don't need a new prison. Just go put the Band-Aid. Go put a cage inside the dome that's torn. And so those are just my comments, Madam Speaker. And Sijus Masi again for the opportunity to speak today.
Sijus Masi, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then the sponsor may close on the amendment. Senator Siniclis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This it's very difficult, decision to be made, especially around Christmas. I really want to give the $5 million. I really do. But, I look around the room here, don't really have have a choice. So it's a compromise. $1 million. Not a kind of guy that likes to place blame, poke blame here and there. And it's just not my style. But there's truth to a lot of the stuff that's being said. Senator Brown mentioned that the governor has a transfer authority. He can easily provide the $5 million. And being here and doing this stuff is just added, it's just a bonus. But I'm not here to place blame. Kind of like I see past the politics. There are lives at stake here, and just like the management of DOC, they mentioned it time and again that they need this money, and thank God there hasn't been a riot or anything so significant, because the conditions there exist. I travel, I do a lot of traveling, and I ask myself, what makes a society productive? What makes a society angry? What makes a society behave the way to behave? And I thought to myself, I was like, wow, the Japanese are so productive. That's because the climate, it's so cool to work outside. And then I think to myself about DOC and the conditions our folks have to work in. And the temperature there can get maddening. You can lose your top real quick. And, but besides that, Madam Speaker, those people are in desperate need, whether they're going to get the aid from the governor or this legislature. And while I still have some time here, I'm not going to let this time pass and not give those guys the help they need. If you want to behave the way you're behaving, then you are answerable to the Almighty for the way you're behaving, and you're not taking a responsibility and helping DOC. You are answerable for that. But if I stand before the Lord and He says, hey, Dwayne, what did you do for those guys? Gave you a couple more weeks. What did you do for them? Say, you know what? I gave it my best. Gave it a shot. With the votes that I have available here, I gave it a shot. And so that's where I am on this. I'm trying to do the 5 because I see beyond the politics, and I see that there's lives are in danger. But I have to compromise because I don't have quite the votes to push $5 million. So I'm here to compromise. Compromise is the $1 million. And if that million saves lives, I hope I make you happy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Susan Masi. On the amendment, is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing no objection, that amendment carries. We're back on the bill. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? All right, Senator Sinicus, my apologies. You were closing on the bill. You are still recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I make a motion to place it on the third reading, and I ask my colleagues for their support. Oh, I beg your pardon. One moment. And you know, it's such a Christmas treat to add, may I add Senator Tello as a co-sponsor? And could you bold it and italicize that, please?
There's a motion to add co-sponsor. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries. Senator Sinicus?
Anybody else? Takers? Senator Jesse Lujan, please. And ma'am, can I get yours too? And Senator Joanne Brown and everybody else who would like to be, that's here. Everybody that's here.
On that motion, clerks, do you have that motion? Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Speaker.
Sinicus.
Yes, and I will place it on the to the voting file.
There's a motion to place Bill number 368-37 as amended by the Committee of the Whole to the third reading. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right, we're now on resolution number 472-37 LS. Senator Taitagui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will make this short. I'd like to place resolution 472-37 onto the second reading file, and then I'd like to discuss it, please. The third reading file, and I'd like to discuss. Thank you. Madam Speaker, before I speak on resolution 472-37, I wish to thank you for holding the public hearing on this resolution. And including it in your public hearing agenda is a testament to your commitment in serving our veterans for their services. Madam Speaker, Resolution 472-37 requests the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to establish a regional office on Guam to service the needs of our veterans on Guam, the CNMI, and the freely associated states. The reason is simple. The closest Veterans Affairs office is in Hawaii. One would think that with today's instant communications, distance is not a factor in securing services, but it is. And our veterans suffer because of it. Conversations with veterans and testimony before this body by the veterans all point to the fact that our veterans are underserved. Those who have served us will and honorably are not being treated as they deserve. This is an injustice that this resolution is here to help alleviate. I hope that my colleagues have read the committee report on this resolution, as the comments and testimony highlight the need for expanded services locally for the veterans throughout the region. You will note in the report that during the recent General Assembly of the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures, I introduced a similar resolution. That resolution passed unanimously. I'm hoping that Resolution 472 will pass unanimously as well. We will add our voice to brethren in the Micronesia, and we will truly speak with one voice on behalf of all our veterans in the Pacific area. or the Micronesian area. We will all know that our veterans deserve better than what we've been getting. All the testimony on this resolution was in support. While some may prefer to wait and add more information, I believe this resolution, as written, gets the point across. I thank all who worked, who took the time to advocate for our veterans on this measure. I especially like to thank Ms. Ginger Cruz for providing the framework for this resolution. As part of her testimony, Ginger quoted the late Congressman and General Ben Blas, who once stated, quote, "We are equal in war, but not in peace," unquote. This sentiment, sadly, still holds true today, and it is not for the lack of trying, Madam Speaker. Many efforts over many years have gone into trying to establish fairness in the treatment of our veterans not living in the continental U.S. It is a fight worth fighting, and we will never give up fighting for our veterans. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Sijusmasi, Senator Taitakwi. On the resolution, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the resolution? If Senator Barnett, you're recognized on the resolution.
Sijusmasi, Madam Speaker. Just on the record, want to lodge my support for the resolution. I don't know what is left to be said after the author's comments, but it is so true. When they need us, we're very fast to assist Uncle Sam, but when our people need Uncle Sam, I'll let you fill in the rest. And it's very unfortunate because, as I recall, this was declared the Year of the Veteran. I was talking with a colleague, we kind of got into a little tussle about there was some funding for a Year of the Veteran conference, which sadly they never held. And in just receipt of so many concerns about issues at the Veterans Cemetery, so I think anytime that we here in this body, and I think we've been very consistent in standing up and trying to bring awareness and fight for our veteran community, anytime we can do that, I want to rise in support of that. And it's just with the Year of the Veteran and really the lack of improvements for veteran services coming from Uncle Sam, I think it's just very discouraging, especially when you kind of look at the very close relationship that the governor and lieutenant governor have with a lot of the admirals, with DOD, and there's just a disconnect somewhere because obviously that's a very close relationship, but then when we hear, as we heard from DOC in the Committee of the Whole, there's no discussion about how we can assist not just agencies, but our veterans. And so again, it comes to the legislature for us to agree to make this statement so that our congressmen can use it to lobby in Washington, D.C., I think is a very good move for our body. And I rise in support of the resolution, and I pray for its unanimous passage. And again, thank you to the veterans of our island. Sijusmasi, Madam Speaker.
Sijusmasi, Senator Barnett. On the resolution, is there anyone who'd like to speak? Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the resolution. As a veteran, or when I first joined the military, I had no idea that we had benefits as veterans. When I was demobing out of Hawaii at Tripler, caught something, and a couple years later, I was able to make a claim. But for people here on Guam and the rest of Micronesia, they have to go to Hawaii or they have to correspond with Hawaii, and can be very tedious because when you're in the process of doing a claim, everything gets transmitted by mail, everything. And it's just tedious and takes a long time, plus a month. and then you probably lose track, and then all these claims are time sensitive. So if you don't get your information in on time, they may adjudicate it and close your case, and that's where a lot of the frustration lies with a lot of our veterans is that their claims get adjudicated, and they don't understand that it's time board, and you have to go through several claims processes before you are actually allowed to get, to get help. Having a regional office here on Guam would be a wonderful, wonderful thing, given our devotion and patriotism to this country. And I think it's only befitting that maybe we send this resolution and kind of nudge Uncle Sam and say, hey, don't forget us out here, you know, we actually love you, and, you know, we hope you, you know, show some gratitude and love us back a little bit. But it's very critical, and you know, I have my hopes up, very optimistic, that hopefully when the Marines get here, and the amount of people that may have to discharge out of Guam is enough so that Uncle Sam says, you know what, we need a regional office on Guam. And so I think this is a wonderful resolution, and it's a first step to realizing something our veterans really need on Guam, and I thank the author. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on the resolution? Senator Barnett.
Colleagues, we're on Resolution 472-37, and we're speaking on it. Is there any senator who wishes to speak? Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Situs Masi. I stand in support of this resolution, and I want to commend the author, and I really want to commend those veterans that came to testify in support of this resolution. It's one of those things that, yes, we've been asking for this year after year after year, so maybe we're losing motivation to keep asking when we keep getting the same response. No, no, no. No plans for that. And, but that was, I thought, a great sign at the hearing that we still have veterans who are willing to take the time out and the energy and the toll that it takes on them to keep asking, that they were very motivated to come down to the hearing and to say to us who represent them to, yes, go and ask for that. Keep asking. It's beyond deserved. It's an obligation that should be fulfilled. It reminds me of the commitments that the military is making today, or the lack of, where we have an EIS that is before us for comment that talks about the impacts of stationing the missile defense system on Guam, and how the two areas it is absolutely going to impact our housing and medical care. That we are already short on housing, we are already short on medical care, and this stationing of the missile defense system here will impact that. And we had a meeting with the senators and the two admirals and all of the Missile Defense Agency representatives that were here on Guam for that EIS process. And we asked them quite direct questions. Will you be building a new hospital? And their answer was no. Do you plan to expand the Naval Hospital? And their answer was no. They said they may bring in additional providers, health providers, to service the Naval Hospital. And that's very frustrating. In the face of actual data that shows the shortages that we have on Guam in those areas, and as this resolution points out, the need for more immediate medical care, medical facilities, and all of those will be able to, and the services really just to the veterans in making claims and everything that is being provided regionally now, based in Hawaii, that could be provided here. And the goal is to cut the delays, cut the wait for the response, where we would have people here on the ground who would respond immediately. And hopefully, that will increase or better the results, the medical result, the health results that we are having, or the veterans are having, by removing the delay caused by going through a region versus a local office. We have one of the veterans testified astutely that we can do this, we have to, bring the numbers. And we have many years different directors of the Veterans Office here on Guam. We have here in the legislature passed measures to increase our survey of veterans, our count of them, which is estimated unofficially to be 24,000, yet officially we can only show those who have registered for immediate health care at the Veterans Agency here on Guam. And so that doesn't necessarily count all of them who are not seeking immediate medical care. But we have passed some measures where we put at the Department of Revenue and Taxation that when we give out these license plates for veterans, that we ask them to register as part of our local count, and that we've asked our mayors, as part of their obligations, to identify the veterans in their communities, and let's count them as well. Mayors already are doing outreach to them as part of their mandates, so we pass measures that ask the mayors to encourage when they are registering as a resident of the village that they register if they are a veteran as well, so that we can formally count them and have some better data. But really, it's the service that the veterans have provided to the United States as a nation, to our community, that we are trying to honor here, and that we are trying to meet obligations. And so I fully support that we continue to encourage outreach, to connect with the veterans, and I want to commend again the veterans associations that do this and have taken this upon themselves to find, reach, and assist and try to get these veterans to register as well so that we can better count. But I think even while we are doing that, they are entitled, they need to have this office established on Guam, and that with that they will receive better service. So I'm in full support, and again, I think it's the very least we can do to advocate on their behalf as well. So I want to thank again to the sponsor and full support of this resolution.
See the Smasi Speaker Terlahi on the main motion. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in full support of this amendment, and you know, I think this is definitely a long time coming. It's unfortunate that you know, it's taken so long, and when it's pretty obvious that there's a need. By having a hub on Guam, it would ensure access to health care, which they are, you know, according to the PACT Act, you know, Guam would be covered. A lot of the toxic conditions or illnesses due to toxic conditions or exposure would be covered. And I just want to highlight one of the testimony. And so I was there at the public hearing, and it was very important to be there because they had a lot of ideas and solutions already, and even a map to how to get to this. One of the those that were testifying was Eddie Regis, a U.S. Air Force veteran, and he outlined what are the things that are needed to establish a hub on Guam. And he listed a couple of items. We need to have a veteran population assessment, so that's really critical, is getting the number of veterans to register. I think that would help with advocating for this. You know, identifying gaps in access to VA health care. So we know from talking to our veterans how difficult it is to access health care from Hawaii. We need to also assess the specific health needs of the veteran population, including prevalent conditions and mental health services, engaging with local healthcare providers, evaluating the financial implications, including the potential cost savings. We know that veterans have to fly, you know, to Hawaii, and imagine, you know, with the airfares increasing, you know, it makes sense. Not only that, but just the hassle of having to fly when you have a medical condition. That's the last thing anyone would want to do, and perhaps it may be not medically advisable. We need to look at the regulatory compliance, so ensuring the establishment meets all federal local regulations, gathering input from veterans. This hub would serve not just Guam, but the CNMI and freely associated states veterans. And, you know, also ensuring it aligns with the broader strategic goals of the VA. Establishing a sustainability plan, so not just creating a hub, but making sure that it lasts into the future. And so this is not only critical for our veterans who, you know, Guam has been the source. In fact, we're one of the highest percentage of those that enlist in the military. And so it's really an injustice that we're not getting the care that our service members need. Not just physical, but also mental health care. And so I think this resolution is so critical, and we look forward to working with the new Congress to ensure that this has traction and it is successful. And so I rise in full support. Sus Masi.
Sus Masi, Senator Perez. Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I also join the chorus of rising in support of this resolution, and I certainly commend my good colleague, Senator Tello Taidagui, the daughter also of a veteran, for leading this initiative and recognizing the need that we have had, that our veterans have had for many years on Guam, to actually get the support they need to get the services that they're eligible for. I myself am also a daughter of a veteran, and I also had to go through the challenges in assisting my father, who is a combat veteran in Vietnam, who served in the Riverine Force and who served 24 years in the U.S. Navy, to get the services that he needed for health-related impacts that he had to deal with. Ultimately, through what was a very trying process and a challenge of having to deal with going back and forth with the Hawaii office, it took several years and much discouragement, particularly from my dad, who was military-orientated, who's not used to having to wait and be frustrated and send his documents in only to have them misplaced and have to put them back together again, resend them, and it took a 3-time process before that was finally facilitated and completed. Fortunately, my father was able to get his due benefits and recognition, which ultimately resulted in 100% disability as a result of service-related health impacts that he had to endure, suffer, and ultimately contributed to his passing. And I know there are many veterans on Guam that have served and have served faithfully and have done their duty in serving their country, serving their island. But when the time comes for their need, they're not sometimes secondary. Maybe they're third or fourth in line. And Guam is almost like an outpost in terms of veterans receiving the services that they need, and that really should not be the case. I mean, we often talk about, as our good colleague Senator Sabina had mentioned, Guam per capita is always ranked, in the top of the list in terms of members of our community that want to go off and join the U.S. military, whichever branch that they have an interest in serving in. But yet when the time comes for support, we often hear, we've sat through many years of those meetings, hearings from our veterans, of continuously relaying the concern that when the time comes, when they need help, when they need support, when they need guidance, many of them don't even bother to apply. Many of them don't even want to go through the hassle. And it's only in recent years you hear other support organizations here on Guam coming forth to be able to provide that assistance and information, even direction to let them know that you are eligible for these benefits that they were not aware of. I remember years ago, Ben Guerrero, who's since, the late Ben Guerrero, who's passed away. He had a little office that was set up on property that John Gerber provided in Chalampago so that veterans could come and get assistance from him. And he himself simply volunteered his time to help other veterans so that they could be aware. I remember going there with my dad, and they would sit outside this little building that they put up, the stairway that you get into an airplane hangar or an airplane to board it. I mean, they put it together, and that became an office. And it was a meeting place for veterans to come and get assistance from the late Ben Guerrero. My dad was one of them. And really, I give him credit because he volunteered his time to help his fellow veterans. I also know, Fred Gofigan, who also worked at the Veterans Affairs Office, whose dad is also retired military, who even informed me, because previously when you actually retired from the military, you were not eligible for these benefits. But Congress had changed those requirements, and he made me aware of that. And that's something I relayed to my dad, who was reluctant. It'd be another hassle, more paperwork, more justification, more doctor's visits. Our people, our veterans, should not have to go through all those challenges. I mean, they are due the respect for the time and service that they've rendered to their country. And our people here deserve that. We should have this regional office here on Guam so that we can also provide a center area for our veterans in the Northern Marianas, for our veterans in the freely associated states and our neighboring islands. And we just need to move on. I mean, Congress has decided, the U.S. government has decided that these veterans are due these benefits. We shouldn't make it difficult for them to obtain that support that they need, especially at a time when they need it the most. When their service and their career has been completed, they've done their duty, and unfortunately, as a result of some of the things that they've been exposed to, they've suffered as a result of it. And we should ease that pain and make it less complicated for them to get the support they need. So, Mr. Speaker, I definitely rise in support of this resolution. I hope that our Congressman Jimmy Moylan, will take this to the next level and get the recognition and support and get this regional office established here on Guam. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to comment on this resolution.
Sidos Masi, Senator Brown. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the main motion? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the main motion? If not, the author may close. Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleagues who spoke so nicely. I mean, I wrote a testimony that I've written out, but now it's from my heart, that I truly am grateful for everyone in this body who fights so hard to ensure that our veterans get what they deserve, and even a little more because of what they've went through, especially those with the disability. It's our duty to take care of them as much as we can. We've done that with a bill that Senator Brown and I had introduced to provide the transportation and extra people over at the Veterans Office to assist these veterans to understand what their benefits are. But the biggest reason why we want this facility here is because of medical. That is one of the biggest concerns our veterans have, seeking medical assistance, finding out what they can and cannot get. And time is of the essence. When you're sick, that illness does not wait until something is put into place. It continues to take over your body, and time sometimes is the worst enemy for someone who's sick. So not only this will help Guam, but also our Micronesian islands, CNMI, FSM, they too will benefit from this. So I thank my colleagues again, and before I turn this over to or pass it on to the voting file, I'd like to include Speaker Therese Terlahi as a co-sponsor on this measure. I don't know why they forgot to put her name on this, but I just wanted to ensure that her name is on this as a co-sponsor. So I'd like to make a motion to...
Senator Taitigui,
okay.
I've confirmed with the clerks that the speaker's name is listed as a co-sponsor.
Okay, thank you so much. I checked my one on the file. It must not include that. So there are a couple people who are not on it, but those who are here today are all on this resolution. And I, again, thank you so much for speaking up for our veterans and fighting for them. It's not going to stop today. We will continue to do that fight for them. And at that point, I make a motion to move this to the third reading file, Resolution 472-37 to the voting file.
Sidos Masi, Senator Taitigui. On the motion, is there any objection? Hearing, seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sidos Masi, Senator. Colleagues, at this time we're going to recess until 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Recess till 2 p.m. I ask that you be prompt and present. Sidos Masi.